We are going to continue on the same page of Masechet Berachot, page Kaf Dalet, page 24, with the words Amar Rav Chanina. We discussed yesterday the first part of this text, which talks completely about a different topic regarding the modesty regarding women and so forth. But in the middle, we are going to see a different topic. Only why is it? How come suddenly we see a different subject completely from the one that we spoke about in the same page? It's because we spoke yesterday about Rav Chanina. So now the Gemara is going to tell us more about Rav Chanina. We are going to learn several philosophies mentioned by Rav Chanina that have to do with a very, very important commandment of the Torah that every Jew is under the obligation to fulfill properly. Before we start with the text, I would like to give you an introduction regarding the law of tefillin. Everyone knows that tefillin is probably the most important commandment in the Torah that we have for the Jew. As a mitzvah, as a commandment that is a positive commandment that has to do between us and God. As you know, the Torah is divided in two categories. The categories of commandments that relate to each other, between one and his fellow man. And the other category is all the mitzvot that we are required to do for Hashem, between us and God. The most important mitzvah that has to do with that category, which is between us and God, is the mitzvah of tefillin. Why is it that the tefillin that we bind around our arm, that we put on our head, is so important? It has several reasons. One of them is a direct commandment of the Torah that says, "Ve'haya le'ot al yadcha," that we read in Shema, "Ve'haya le'ot al yadecha ultotafot ben enecha." So the Torah tells us that this you have to wear, you have to put al yadcha, that is on your arm, that's the tefillin shel yad, and then you have the tefillin shel rosh, based on the pasuk totafot ben enecha. Our sages say in the Gemara in Masechet Menachot that ben enecha does not mean between the eyes, because in Hebrew it means between the eyes. Ben enecha. But our sages said here it means gova harosh. The Ramban explains that the eyes do not begin here. They start from here, from the brain on that spot, from the top of the head. That's where the energy of light that goes into this receptacle, that recipient that we call the eyes, that's how it's like a camera that gives us the possibility to see. In that case, what is the most important part? The vessel that contains it, or the essence? The vessel is the eyes that we see, but the essence of light that by which we see, we are capable of seeing, comes from the brain. Al gova harosh, on the top of the head, and that's the reason why, even though based on what it says in the Torah, ultotafot ben enecha, the tefillin between the eyes, but the Torah means that which we put on the head, exactly on the spot. That's why we have to be very careful where to put the tefillin. Because if you put it here, that's not the spot. If you put it here, it's not the spot. That's not where we get the energy that the brain gives us and the potential to see. You understand? It comes from here. Baruch Hashem, we have a doctor here. Maybe he can agree with that. Otherwise, that's what our sages say. You understand? The theory is here. The inside story, maybe the doctors would know more about this. So now we have two mitzvot in tefillin. The arm, le'ot al yadcha, and le'totafot ben enecha, the one on the head. Why is it that two are required? Here is one explanation given by the Rab Nachman Breslev. What is the difference between the brain, the head, and the arm? The arm represents koach ha'ma'aseh. The arm gives us the power to do things with our hands. Most of the things that human beings do are done with their hands. You don't do anything with your feet, you walk with your feet. But with your hands, you do. That's called ma'aseh yadav. The act of your hands. That specifically is talking about the category of people who get their parnasa, or they behave with their hands. In other words, they do things with their hands. If you are a carpenter or a builder or anything of the kind, or a painter, you do it with your hands. So you might get the idea that the power that you have, let's say you are very talented, you are capable of giving masterpieces, painting masterpieces, and you might think that since I'm a genius, so it's my power. The tefillin reminds us that it's not your power, it's the power that God has given to you as a gift. He gave you the talent to work with your hands. That's why we put the tefillin of the arm. The tefillin on the head is, that there are the second category of people who work in this world with their brains, such as teachers, or judges, or scientists, everyone, mathematicians, people who have to work with their brains. So sometimes you have a genius, for example, so he might think it's his power. No, we remind him all the time by putting the tefillin on the rosh. We are reminding this category of people that in fact it is God who has given you the brain by which you function, by which you do your parnasa in this life. That's one explanation that Rabbi Nachman Breslev says as to why do we have the tefillin shel rosh and the tefillin shel yad, of the hand. There are other reasons, and the biggest reason is, of course, has to do with Kabbalah. That is the secret that only God knows. But one thing is definitely acceptable by everyone, that the tefillin is a royal crown that the Jew has to put. On the day when God gave us the Torah at the mountain of Sinai, He proclaimed us to be a nation of kings. A nation of kings. Ve'atem tiyuli bnei melachim ve'goy kadosh, the Torah says in Parashat Yitro. You shall be for me a nation of kings. I always tell the very short story of Ben Gurion and the very beginning of the state of Israel when it was inaugurated. So Ben Gurion came to America to ask for help. So he went to the President Eisenhower. He said to him, we need your help to a new state. So the President of America said to him, how many people do you have? What is the number of your population? He said to him, we have 2 million people. He said to him, 2 million? I am the president of 200 million. Well, I have more responsibilities than you. Why do you worry? 2 million, that's all? So Ben Gurion answered him, you're right. Your excellency, whatever, your presidency. You are the president of 200 million people, but I am the president of 2 million kings. What do you do with 2 million kings? It's not easy, of course. This is something that is known as a joke, but it has a definite truth. Every Jew is a king. Because God has chosen us by giving us His Torah. He chose us to be His chosen people. And the Torah calls us Bnei Melachim, people, children of the king. That makes us kings, that makes us princes. Whether you could regard it as philosophically as you want or psychologically as you want, the Jews do not like to say that we are kings, that we are chosen. In fact, the nations, they know that more than the Jews themselves. I always repeat that, but that's not the issue. The issue is that's why we put the tefillin shel rosh. It's a royal thing that God is asking us to put to remind us that we are special. We put the royal stuff on us, and that's how we have to regard ourselves. That doesn't mean that we have to behave with arrogance. That does not mean that we have to regard ourselves with ga'ava. No, on the contrary. Our duty as Jews is to show the world that we are humble, that we are nice people, that we help always with a good heart. But at the same time, we are kings because we were chosen by God. And the reason why we put the tefillin on the arm is we bind ourselves to Hashem, to the mitzvot of Hashem, which means not only now listen to this, the head, the tefillin shel rosh, tells us that we are kings, but the tefillin shel yad tells us that we are His servants. Did you ever see a person who is a servant and who is also a king? There is no such a thing. But we are this kind of people. Jews are kings who are servants of God. How do you define a servant? A servant, a slave, is a person who is attached to his master. Whatever his master is telling him to do, he does. That's the reason why we bind ourselves with the tefillin, to show that we are attached to God and that we are enslaved to His commandments. So that's the only case in the world, in the history of mankind, that a human being can be at the same time a slave, at the same time he is also a king. And we find this very explicitly in the Torah. One day it says, Banim atem lashem elokechem. On one hand he calls us bene melachim, the kings, mamash, kings. On the other hand he says, ki avadayhem. Right? The Torah says that Hashem proclaims us to be His servants. So we are this and that, and that's why we put tefillin. Our sages, I mean the sugya, the matter of tefillin is so wide. In fact, I can tell you that you could see online at least 90 lectures just about the laws and the discussions regarding tefillin. I just want to add another thing. On Shabbat we don't put tefillin. Why is it that we don't put tefillin on Shabbat? We have to put it 6 days a week. But on Yom Tov and Shabbat we don't. In order to answer this question, we have to give you another explanation why we put tefillin. What did we say? We mentioned before that there is a pasuk, a verse in the Torah that says, "V'haya le'ot al yadecha ultotafot ben einecha." What is ot? Ot in Hebrew means sign, which means this is a Jewish sign, a Jewish identity. The Jew must carry his identity card. And we have 3 cards of identity. The first one is Brit Milah, by the way. The circumcision that the Jew circumcises himself is the first card of identity that he is a Jew. The Jew means it has to do with God. You know, like the nations say, as long as there is one Jew alive in this planet, there is always a doubt that there is a God. Because whenever you see a Jew, you remember God. The Chinese also, if they see a Jew, even though they don't know much about the Jewish people, but if they see a Jew, they would say, oh, it has to do with God. Even our enemies, they know that. So the Torah says, "V'haya le'ot al yadcha." Let the tefillin be a sign on you, a mark on you. That's a card of identity of Jewishness. We have 3. The first one is circumcision, because the Torah says, "V'haya le'ot berit." So the Berit Milah is considered ot, and ot means not oath. Ot means a sign, a mark, right? A mark that you are a Jew. The second sign is the tefillin. As we say, you see that the tefillin also is considered to be ot, as it says in the Torah, "V'haya le'ot al yadcha ultotafot ben einecha." What is the third card of identity that we have that is also called ot? Shabbat. Where do we see that Shabbat is called ot? In the Kiddush that you say every Shabbat morning. "V'shameru bnei Yisrael et Shabbat, la'asot et Shabbat ledorotam berit olam, beni uven bnei Yisrael ot hi le'olam." Between me and my people Israel, the Shabbat is always the sign between me and them. Now, so still the question is unresolved yet. We asked the question, why is it that we don't put tefillin on Shabbat? Let me tell you why. The Torah says, "Al pi shene'edim yakum davar." Everything is established based on the testimony of 2 people. Less than 2, the testimony is not valid. This is a law in Jewish law. Alright? two witnesses. You need two witnesses. For example, you perform a wedding, you need two witnesses. If you have no witnesses, the kiddushin are not valid. You know that, right? Anything that you do requires two. In order to validate something, you require two witnesses. Same thing also here. You need two witnesses to prove that you are a Jew every day. Every day you need two witnesses. So we have every day we have two witnesses. We have the Berit Milah, the circumcision, right? We go with it, and then we have the tefillin. On Shabbat, since it is also one of the witnesses, you cannot have also tefillin. Berit Milah you cannot undo. It's in your body, so you have to carry it whether it is Shabbat or not, right?
So what do you have to say with this?
1 minute. So Shabbat is another mark of identity. That's two witnesses. Since you have two witnesses, you don't need the tefillin. By the way, there is a big discussion in the Gemara whether Shabbat is also could be a day of tefillin, and the halachic is even some rabbis say that you could tefillin on Shabbat. You could put tefillin on Shabbat, but we don't put tefillin on Shabbat because the decision was that it cannot be done on Shabbat because it might offend Shabbat, since it is also one of the most respectable signs. The witnesses that we need, the two witnesses. What did you want to ask, Doctor?
So the one who has no Brit Milah.
Huh?
The people that has no Brit Milah.
They cannot be considered, in fact, that they have no oath. Nevertheless, it's a good question, because apparently what David is asking is obvious. I mean, non-Jews, they don't have Berit Milah. And even though they circumcise themselves, the Zohar HaKadosh says it's not considered, like for example, the nation of Ishmael is known to have done Berit Milah, but since it is done the wrong way, they don't do it on the 8th day as the Torah specifies. So the Zohar says, even though it is something that God will give them a reward for it, but it's known that it is a false kind of circumcision. Whatever the Christians do, that's already a different topic. They really don't do it. They do it only because of some other reason, or whatever it is. It's not the nations are not considered to have to be people who perform the circumcision as it was done by Abraham Avinu and so forth. So they have no Jewish identity, no question about it. Well, of course you should ask me, so what about people who convert? Well, you know that people who convert to Judaism, the first thing they have to do is to do circumcision. Why is it that circumcision is required? Because without it, if he has only the conversion without the Berit Milah, he's not going to be considered a Jew. What about a Jew who is born a Jew, but does not have Berit Milah because, let's say he was in Russia in a certain time that they did not allow them to have circumcision. As long as he is under the reason that he was forced not to do it, he is still considered a Jew. When I said not considered a Jew, I mean biologically he is a Jew because he was born from a Jewish mother. But circumcision is the mark of identity. He doesn't have it. It says, for example, our sages said that in order to enter paradise, Avraham Avinu is standing and he will check if you have Berit Milah or not. Well, that of course requires many explanations. That's not easy. But in the meantime, even for its facet, that's what it means. It means without that, you don't pertain to the world of God. That's a sign that God has already, that's a stamp of God. We call it Chotam HaKadosh, the holy stamp. That's what is done in our flesh. What about Jews who, for example, the doctors say, for example, you cannot have circumcision because if the baby will have this circumcision, he will die. Then he is a Jew and everything, and God will make sure to recognize him. But he is not to be blamed for that. Or even like the Shulchan Aruch brings a case, or halachic case, such as if there was a guy whose baby died during the circumcision, and then he had another child again, and the baby again died in the middle of the circumcision, he's not allowed to do for the third child that will come after that. He will not have to circumcise. But how can he be that then he is not Jewish? No, he is Jewish. Don't worry. But let's not go now into the laws of Berit Milah because it could take us to the different worlds. I mean, Korban or not, that's already something else. Of course not. For example, if it says about, I'll give you at least a small answer to your question. But regarding Korban Pesach, for example. Korban Pesach that they used to bring on the eve of Pesach, the Torah specifically says, Ve'arel lo yochal bo. So a person who is uncircumcised cannot attend the feast of Korban Pesach. Now, a person who is in this category that I just mentioned, we prefer to leave it to higher, bigger shoulders than mine to decide when the time comes back again, when the Mashiach comes back and we go again into fulfilling the mitzvah of Korban Pesach. So far we understand what is the importance of tefillin. And our sages said, Kol hamekayem mitzvah tefillin keilchata ma'arich yamim. Said, the tefillin is also a segula. If you have the best tefillin, the Rabbi Ben Chaim's tefillin, or if you have, but if you are also meticulous in saying the bracha properly and to put it properly and to do it with excitement and happiness every day, because you get used to everything, then you lose the excitement. But if you keep, of course it's not a joke, it is, I'm talking now about the excitement that one should feel when you perform the mitzvah. When you do the mitzvah with at least, if not big excitement, but at least you know for whom you do that. You understand why you put tefillin. If you do tefillin with a proper set of mind every day, it will give you a longer life. So we understand that tefillin has to do with life. And why not? The King Almighty is the master of life. If he sees that you are his servant, keeping the sign of royalty, he will extend to you a longer life. That has to do with emunah, you believe or not. Now, before we start with the text, which we will do quickly, don't worry, I have to tell you that there are there are hundreds of laws regarding tefillin. Hundreds of laws. Some of the laws appear in the Shulchan Aruch, written by Maran, the Shulchan Aruch, Rabbi Yosef Karo, who discusses the honor or respect rather by which we should refer to tefillin. A tefillin is only a piece of something. It's a box. Inside it has scrolls, right? It gets its sanctity and holiness from the scrolls inside, and by the fact that it was designated to be tefillin. Once you have the tefillin, you have to behave with it with the proper set of mind. You cannot go into the bathroom, for example, urinate with the tefillin on you, unless if there was an emergency of some kind. You understand? Now you cannot sleep with the tefillin. It's definitely forbidden according to the Shulchan Aruch and the Gemara, based on what it says in the Gemara. You are not allowed to sleep or even to doze when the tefillin is on you. That's known as a lack of respect to the tefillin. Why is that? Because during your sleep, there are some functions that the body does without your control, such as passing a wind or something that is not respectable for a tefillin. You cannot, for example, have your tefillin in your bedroom where you sleep with your wife. So while you are allowed to be with your wife when the tefillin is there, but you cannot cohabit with her, you cannot be with her at that time if the tefillin is right there. So let's say you have only one room and you have no other place where to put tefillin, and you are in the same. So what? Very good. So keli betoch keli. So the Maran, the Shulchan Aruch says you have to put this tefillin inside, to put it in a bag, and the bag in another bag, or even any bag, or inside the drawer or something, and then you are set. You could be with your wife. All right. So those are things that we have learned as far as the obligation how to respect tefillin. One of them also is tole et tefillah. Let's say you take the tefillin by the straps and you play like this. It's not to be done. You are not allowed to take the tefillin by the straps and to hang them. That's obvious. Everybody will agree to that. But what about hanging the tefillin, let's say on some kind of nail on the wall? When it's hanging, then this is what we are going to discuss in the Gemara. Are you allowed to do that or not? Let's go into the Gemara. Amar Rav Chanina. אני ראיתי את רבי שתלה תפיליו. Rav Chanina declares, Rav Chanina was the Talmid, was the student of Rabbeinu HaKadosh, known only by the title Rabbi. Whenever you see in the Talmud the title Rabbi, it refers only to one person, one great rabbi, whose name is Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda, he was the prince Therefore he is known as Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, known by the title Rabbi. Whenever, because of his great honor, he was not only the richest man in his time, but he was also the greatest mind, Torah mind of his time. He was the last of the generation of the sages of the Mishnah. He was the Talmid, the student of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. He was the Talmid of Rabbi Akiva, and so forth. But he was the last generation of the sages of the Mishnah, after which begins the era of the sages of the Gemara with Rabbi Yochanan, or in Bavel you have Rav Shmuel and so forth. And so now, Rav Chanina was the Talmid of Rabbeinu HaKadosh. You know, Rabbeinu HaKadosh, what he did was phenomenal. Without Rabbeinu HaKadosh, without Rabbi, whenever we say Rabbi, it's Rabbeinu HaKadosh. The reason why we call him Rabbeinu HaKadosh, by the way, why? Our sages said, why do we call him Rabbeinu, the Holy One? He's the only one by whom we refer with this kind of very supreme way of. Because our sages said, because he never put his hands even under his belt. That's what our sages said, which means he behaved as a very holy man. Which means he made sure he was never contracted or contaminated by tum'ah, by any kind of contamination, whether it is a seminal issue or other things. He always preserved himself with tremendous holiness. That's why we call him Rabbeinu HaKadosh. But in the Gemara you will find mostly that we refer to him by the term Rabbi, which means he is the rabbi of all the people of Israel. One of his millions of Talmidim, of students, was Rav Chanina. And Rav Chanina said something that is very surprising. Ra'iti et Rabbi shetalat tefilav. I have seen with my own eyes Rabbi who hanged, who put his tefillin hanging on something on the wall. Which means, how could this be? We know that it is against a statement made by our sages that one has to be very careful when it comes to the honor and respect that you owe to tefillin. So that was a statement by Rav Chanina. We shall see. The Gemara brings a question, which means another text which contradicts the text that we just read now. It says that anybody who disrespects the tefillin by hanging it loosely, his life will be hanging. Hitlu lo chayav. Which means what is the meaning of hitlu lo chayav? That his life will be hanging. It means he cannot be sure of his life. Of course, nobody is sure of his life. You cannot find anybody in the world that is sure whether he will be alive tomorrow or not. But at least the way people understand, people know, well, I'll see you tomorrow. But this man is in a worse, in a more dangerous situation than anybody else. His life is in danger. Of course, everyone is in danger because of some some things that could occur anytime. But this one has added upon himself another source that could be dangerous for him. The fact that he disrespected the tefillin the way he left it. We are going to discuss this. I mean, it cannot be just like this, openly like that, in such a simple way. I mean, there are circumstances in which let's say when you have an emergency, so you put the tefillin as it is and you run, let's say to the bathroom or something. Is this the issue? So now the Gemara says, how can you tell, hey Rabbi Chanina, how can you say that Rabbi himself, the master of Am Israel, that he behaved in such a way by hanging the straps of the tefillin, which is disrespectful? Didn't we read in a Baraita, in another text from the time, a text that came from the time of the sages of the Mishnah, Hatolet Filav, that anybody who hangs the tefillin like this, his life will be hanging, which means he cannot be sure of himself, of what's happening to him, which means it's a very serious problem. And even the Gemara goes on, Dorshech Hamurot Amru, so we found the confirmation to this belief from the Torah itself. The Torah, there is a section in the Torah that talks about the kelalot, the curses. right? Remember at the end, Parashat Kitavo, the end of the Torah, as well as the Parashat Bechukotai, has a whole section that curses, one curse after another. One of the curses is Vayuhayecha teluim lecha min neged, that in times, Chas v'Shalom, when God is angry at us, our life will become hanging on a thread. Which means teluim lecha min neged, it means that they will be hanging, which means you don't know what's going to be to you. You are in danger, in constant danger. And yet our sages said that this statement of the Torah refers to the one who tole tefilav, the one who hangs his tefillin, which means as a sign of disrespect. So how could you tell me that Rabbi himself did it? That's the contradiction that the Gemara poses. You understand the question? Very simple. The Gemara says, La kashya. It's not a contradiction, don't worry. Ha birtsu'a, ha biktsitsa. Depending on the situation, when is it permissible, when it's not permissible. If you take the tefillin by the ktsitsa, what is ktsitsa? The ktsitsa is the box, the black box. It's known as ktsitsa. Today in modern Hebrew, ktsitsa means a meatball. But the ktsitzot, but in the vernacular of the Talmud, ktsitsa means the black box of the tefillin. So now, you know that the black box is heavy, heavier than the straps. So if you hang the tefillin from the straps when the head is hanging, that's disrespectful. But if you have nowhere else to put your tefillin, and you see a nail, and you take the tefillin, and you put the ketzitza, the black box, on the top, when the straps are the ones that are hanging, there's no problem. By the way, this tells us that the straps of the tefillin are not as holy as the ketzitza. The ketzitza itself, the black box, is very holy. Unlike the straps are only a vehicle. That's according to most of the poskim. Most of the poskim, they say that the straps are not very holy. And they are holy, but not to the extent of the ketzitza. By the way, Ari HaKadosh, according to Kabbalah, the straps also are part of the tefillin, therefore they have the same holiness. But that's a difference of opinions, that's not the issue now. So we see now that Rabbeinu HaKadosh did not make a mistake. Probably there was a reason why he had to hang it. And the way he did it, you could be sure that he did it with the tzitza on the top, and the straps are the ones that hanging, and that's no problem with that. So therefore, we have no contradiction with what Rav Hanina said. You understand that? Let's continue. And if you want another answer to this question, this is Aramaic saying, and if you want, I'll tell you even more about this. Even if you say that both ways are forbidden, whether you hang it from the ktsitsa or you hang it from the retsuah, the straps, both ways are not to be done, except in some emergency situation. So how come then we come back again to the question, how come Rabbeinu HaKadosh did it? So the Gemara says, V'chitala ribi b'chistatala. Make no mistake about it, Rabbeinu HaKadosh knows what he does, and what he did hang was the tefillin inside the bag, kista, kisui. Kisui means the bag in which we put tefillin. In that case, you are hanging the bag itself, is no problem.
The bag or the plastic?
The bag or the plastic, whatever is a container where you put tefillin.
And what?
In fact, in the old time, they didn't have little beautiful bags that we have. I mean, they didn't have that. They had a handkerchief, they took the handkerchief and they covered the tefillin, that's it. Anything that covers the tefillin is known as kista, kisui, which means a cover. So, as long as it is covered, the Gemara says, there's no problem in hanging in case you had no other way. So now, 1 minute. So now we understand that what Rabbi has done, it's not a contradiction to what Rav Hanina. Rav Hanina, what did he say? I saw Rabbi hanging his tefillin. So, there was a commotion. How could this be? The answer is very simple. It's not that he hanged the tefillin when it was not covered. He hanged it after it was covered. He had a nail there where he used to hang his tefillin after he puts them inside the cover. So the Gemara is immediately attacking with another question. Ihachi, look in the text. Ihachi, maile memra. If that's the case, why even bring the subject? Of course there is no problem with that. The Gemara says, as long as it is in the bag, who cares where you put it? You understand? So why did you have to bother to bring me? Rabbi Hanina said, I saw Rabbeinu HaKadosh hanging his tefillin. If this was inside the bag, who cares? Why did you have to bother to tell me? So the Gemara answers the question. Mahu de tema. By looking inside the text, little by little, you will be able to have knowledge how to study Gemara. Mahu de tema. You might have said, Tibba'e hannaha besefer Torah kamash ma'lan. The Gemara says, I'll tell you what is the matter. Because what was the question? The question is, Ma'ile Memra. If you tell me that he put it in the bag, then there is no problem. Why did you bother even bringing me the case? So the Gemara says, no. Because some people might have thought that even the tefillin inside the bag requires putting it with reverence like you do the Sefer Torah. How do we put Sefer Torah? Can you hang a Sefer Torah? You don't hang a Sefer Torah. You take the Sefer Torah with your hands, you bring it into the Hechal, and you put it with respect and reverence. So, which means Sefer Torah requires not only that you don't drop it or hanging it, but it has to be put with reverence, right? Yes. So some people might have thought, Mahu de tema, some people might have thought that tefillin also inside the bag requires reverence to such an extent like Torah, kamash ma'lan. Therefore the Gemara comes to teach me that tefillin does not require that much like a Sefer Torah. As long as you don't hang it or you don't leave it uncovered, displayed somewhere in a very disrespectful way, but it does not require to take it and to put it in a sanctuary, in a place in which it rests. This is not requested. You understand? And that's the reason why the matter had to be brought in the Talmud to teach me that here is what you have to do as far as respect, and here is what you don't have to do, even though we do it for a Sefer Torah. Now what is your question, David?
I say, it's a lot about more Sefer Torah. Tefillin, you put in your hand, you put in your head. Sefer Torah, you not put it. So you cannot respect the same thing, the same way.
No, I mean, what you are asking is not necessary. Here we are talking about the item. The item itself. I mean, regardless of where, if you put it or not. Let's say you don't put the tefillin. Does that mean that you can hang it? Let's say you have two pairs of tefillin. One you put always. That you give it respect. And the other pair of tefillin, you throw it. No, can you? You cannot. All right, but here is, we are not discussing here what we do with each item. Everybody knows that you have to do with tefillin, you have to wear it. The Torah, you read it. That's two different things. But that does not have an issue with what we were discussing, how you refer to it. Still, everybody knows that tefillin is kadosh, is holy, and everybody will tell you it is as holy as Torah. So, therefore, the Gemara is correct by insinuating that there is a possibility that people might think that it requires the same way how you put it from your hands to the Hechal, you have to do the same thing with tefillin. No. In fact, I will conclude the session of tonight by telling you a little story that the Talmud says in Masechet Berachot, around this place. There was a student of the yeshiva. The Talmud tells us this story. It's a tragic story. It will even somehow answer your question. A young yeshiva bocher, a young learner of the yeshiva. In those times, they didn't have bathrooms in the house. They had bathrooms outside. Now he finished his prayer, he was holding his tefillin, right? And then he wanted to go to the bathroom. Immediately, where is he going to put the tefillin? He cannot put it inside the bathroom. In those times it was not that clean. So there was an opening of a window which gives way to the outside. So he put the tefillin there while he does his needs. Outside there was a prostitute that passed by, and she saw the tefillin, she took it, she stole it, and she left. The poor boy, after he finished, he come to pick up his tefillin. The tefillin is not there. Oh my God, where is my tefillin? I lost my tefillin, somebody stole it. All right, what can you do? You see, you lose, you lose. He went back to his yeshiva to learn as usual. He probably went and he bought another tefillin. The prostitute, she was an evil woman. Knowing how the Jews regard this matter, she went to the yeshiva. And she went to the head of the yeshiva and she said to him, "Sir, the guy, the owner of this tefillin was with me, which means for my services as a prostitute, and he did not pay me. And here is the proof. I have his tefillin in my hands, like Tamar and Yehuda in the Torah." Right? Now, everybody knew that this student was a holy student and a clean one. And everybody probably came to tell him, because everybody heard, the rumor spread. "Oh my God, he was with a prostitute." But I'm sure that all the yeshiva, knowing him, they said no. Because he kept saying, "No, I was not, I'm innocent. She stole my tefillin." Everybody believed him. I assure you that everybody believed him. But the boy himself said, "Yeah, I know they believe me. But there will always remain some doubt in their mind that maybe I lied." He went up to the roof and he threw himself and he committed suicide, the Gemara says. From there, the Gemara says that since then they completely blocked those kind of windows that they did have, and they found a different way where to put the tefillin. Why did I bring this story? Number one, to show you that tefillin is a companion of the Jew. And now sometimes you find yourself in a place in which you don't know where to put it. You have to be careful where you put it. But what I wanted to say is that here is a guy who put his tefillin in a place in which not so clean, and yet it was okay. But can you think that he is going to bring a Sefer Torah inside? That obviously nobody is going to do that. But since tefillin is something that is lighter, it's not as holy. But the second category of holiness is the tefillin. The first one is Sefer Torah. You should know that. So now we know that in some cases, I have seen with my own eyes in the yeshiva of Tanger in Morocco, Harav Silver, one of the greatest geniuses of this generation. He was one of my rebbes, Harav Silver. He came from London and he was our teacher for several years in the yeshiva of Tanger. He was known as a mind that was impossible to describe. In fact, there is a story about it. My professor of math was Dr. Ohnona. And he gave us a certain problem in mathematics, in algebra. And he says these problems, even professors in the universities, they don't know how to solve it. So we took the problem and we went to Rav Silver. Rav Silver never went to school. He went only to yeshiva. But he had a phenomenal mind. So I remember I saw him. I remember every day we used to see him with his cigarette and his mouth, and always thinking, and the book is open. That's all. So we came to him, we brought the problem in a piece of paper. And then we saw in the back what he's doing. He looked at the paper, 2 minutes. He wrote the answer, he put it back on the platform there, and he returned to his studies. We came, "Rabbi, can we pick up the paper?" Yes. We brought it to Dr. Ohnona. He said, "It's unbelievable. This is the answer. How did he know?" Unbelievable. That was a yeshiva in Tanger, by the way, in Morocco. It's closed now. It's no more. But in my time. So in this yeshiva, I saw the same rabbi, Rav Silver, who was angry at one of the students who didn't appear in the class, and he went to the bathroom with his tefillin and his talit. Out of anger, he did it. I remember I have this picture, and I always remained the question, how come he did it? Well, I can tell you, after looking into the question, after looking into the poskim, I saw that in some cases it's okay. But don't do it as a habit, chas v'shalom, because it is disrespectful. And here the text is teaching us how to respect a tefillin. I mean, even though it is, in fact, it is a daily companion. You know, usually when you have something with you all the time, you lose respect because you get used to it.
When you went?
I didn't have even the time. There was no time even to see whether it was a matter of 1 second or two to holler at that boy who was in the bathroom, didn't come out at the time when he was supposed to be in class. So he came all the way from the prayer there to fetch him from there. We cannot condemn him for that. This is possible. Only for me, I was only 15 years of age, and for me it looked like if it was a terrible thing. But in fact, it's okay as long as you know who's deal with that. He knows what he's doing, and therefore, but to do this in a regular basis to show disrespect of your tefillin, then you should know that by disrespecting your tefillin, you are tampering with dangers in life. So, there is a third text by Rav Hanina in this same text, but that's another different kind of discussion that we will leave to next week in Yirtzeh Hashem.
הרב, מה הכוונה? תלויים שהוא מתפלל נגדם? או תלויים...
לא מתפלל נגדם, לא כמו הקראים שהיו תולים את זה יפה מאוד, זה היית יכול לשאול.
לקמרה.
Yes.